I'm Sierra Morgan, 27, fresh out of college with an honors degree in sustainable architecture. That night, I was sitting at the dinner table in the house my family's owned for 4 generations, a weathered ranch on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. The kitchen still smelled of apple pie, the golden glow of the lamp casting shadows on the family photos lining the walls, but the air, it was colder than a mountain wind. "You've got 1 week to get out of here," my brother Ethan spat, flashing that half smirk I've never trusted. His voice was casual, but every word hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My parents, Robert and Diane, just sat there, eyes fixed on their plates, forks and knives still in hand, acting like they didn't hear a thing. No one spoke up for me. No explanation. Not a shred of sympathy. I sat there, frozen. Shocked? Sure. But hurt. That was old news. This wasn't the first time my own family had written me out of their story. But this time, they'd crossed a line. Ethan was always the golden boy, shipped off to baseball camp in Florida just for hitting 1 home run. Me? I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover college applications. He got a shiny new Dodge Ram for his 18th birthday. Me? I pieced together a Craigslist laptop to finish my architecture projects. And now, he had the nerve to tell me to leave the house I'd helped Grandpa rebuild, step by splintered step, with my own 2 hands. What Ethan didn't know was that I didn't show up to that dinner empty-handed. I knew something was up. I knew there was something rotten behind the polished facade of this family meal. And most importantly, I knew I was holding the one thing that could make my whole family freeze in their tracks. Right there, in the purse tucked under the table, was something that could flip the game they thought they had in the bag. What they didn't know was that Grandpa Franklin didn't leave this world without a parting word. And this isn't just a story about a family dinner gone cold. This is a story of schemes, legacy, and betrayal in the blood of kin. Stick with me, because you won't believe how I turned the tables. // they don't know I was born tied to this land. Every square foot of dirt, every brick in the house, every scratch on the hardwood floors carries the fingerprints of Grandpa Franklin and mine. Not Ethan's, not my parents', but mine. My childhood wasn't Disneyland. It was summer afternoons, barefoot, racing through the cornfields, sweat dripping as I helped Grandpa patch the horse barn roof after the 2009 storm. It was the swing he hung under the biggest oak in the backyard, where I'd sit for hours, listening to his stories about the war, about planting apple rows with Grandma, his hands calloused but steady. To him, I wasn't the spare youngest daughter my mom once let slip. I was the heir to the soul of this land. He called me Red because my hair blazed every time the afternoon sun hit it. Red, you've got your grandma's eyes, seeing right through the shiny surface to the real worth underneath. He said it over and over, like he knew one day I'd need those words as my compass. Ethan? He was scared of getting his hands dirty. Scared of mosquitoes. He'd hole up in his air-conditioned room playing Call of Duty while I was out there, hammer in hand, fixing the broken fence. When I said I wanted to study ecological architecture, Grandpa didn't just cheer me on. He sent me articles about Frank Lloyd Wright's designs and built me a bookshelf with his own hands before I left for Seattle. Once, when I landed a scholarship, he clipped the announcement from the local paper and taped it to the fridge door. The only time anything about me was ever displayed in this house. My parents? They told me, if you can handle it, handle it. That was their excuse for checking out. Ethan was coddled like a prized egg, while I was taught to be tough, to need no one. But the truth? It was Grandpa who lifted me up, with love, with faith, and with a plan they never saw coming. Now, sitting here, thinking back on it all, I know he wasn't just preparing me to be an architect. He was preparing me for the fight. And the kicker? They, my own family, started this war with those ice-cold words. You've got 1 week to get out. But me? I've had a lifetime to get ready. // After Grandpa's funeral, I decided to stay at the house for another week. Part of it was because I couldn't bear to leave. Not when every corner reminded me of him. But mostly because something felt off. Everything was moving too fast. On the second day after the funeral, I walked into the woodshop out back, where Franklin used to spend hours carving, fixing the lawnmower, or just sipping coffee in peace. But this time, his beloved tool cabinet was gone. The place was cleaned out, like he'd never been there. I asked Mom, "Where's Grandpa's workbench?" She waved me off, her voice so casual it chilled me. "Some guy from the flea market bought it. It was just old junk anyway, Sierra." Old junk? That workbench was where Grandpa carved my first wooden knife when I was 8. A few hours later, I caught Dad hauling boxes of old photos out to the porch. Pictures of Grandpa in his youth, his wedding with Grandma, me riding a horse with him when I was 10, and he was packing them up to donate. No discussion. No hesitation. I spoke up. We shouldn't be clearing things out this fast. At least, keep what matters. He didn't even turn around. Don't get all sentimental, Sierra. We need to clean up. So we can appraise the property. Appraise the property? I started noticing the hushed phone calls in the middle of the night. Strangers showing up to walk the land, holding blueprints and measuring tapes. Some guy in a Ralph Lauren shirt and fancy cowboy boots told Ethan, "Subdivide this plot. You'll get at least 25 homes, starting at $500,000 each." I stood behind the trees, my heart turning to ice. These people, they weren't here to pay respects. They were here to carve up the pie. Ethan smirked. If the old man knew, he'd probably claw his way out of the grave. Good thing he's gone. I clenched my fists, blood rushing to my face. But I didn't step out. Not then. I just pulled out my phone and recorded everything. The only question burning in my mind was, when did they start planning this? Before or after he was still breathing? One thing I knew for sure, if I stayed quiet, they'd turn every memory, every drop of sweat, every piece of Grandpa's legacy into a cookie-cutter subdivision with some flashy real estate logo and a hollow soul. No. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not while I'm still standing. // that night, I went for a walk to clear my head. Late fall air bit at my skin, fog weaving through the apple trees at the edge of the orchard. I tried to keep my anger in check. But it was hard when every corner of this house was being stripped, erased, put up for sale, like everything Grandpa worked for meant nothing. I came back earlier than usual and passed by the main hallway, where Dad's study is, that room with the oak door always shut tight like it's hiding state secrets. The light was still on, the door slightly ajar. And then I heard the voices. Familiar ones. "We need to deal with her soon," Dad said. Calm. Cold. Not a hint of hesitation. She's getting too attached to this place. Always scribbling notes, like she's taking inventory of her own damn property. I stopped breathing. My back pressed against the wall, heart pounding like a drum. Ethan's voice cut in. "Don't worry. I've got it handled. I've already talked to Westwood Development. Once the paperwork's done, we sell it all. She's got no leg to stand on. The old man's gone. The law's not on her side." I heard the pour of whiskey. Glasses clinked like a toast to their pact. A verdict sealed behind my back. Letting her stay any longer just complicates things. 1 week's enough to kick her out. I'll lay it out at the family dinner this weekend. My nails dug into my palms, nearly drawing blood. Right there at the family table, where I learned to hold a fork and knife, where Grandpa told stories of his Marine Corps adventures, they planned to toss me out like a stranger. No te ars. No negociation. Just cold blood. I slipped away quietly, leaving no trace on the creaky hardwood. The trembling in my bones wasn't from the chill. It was rage, wrapped in razor-sharp clarity. Right then, a memory surged up, something Franklin whispered to me 3 days before he passed. Read, "There's a letter for you, hidden in the desk. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." I didn't know why he left me those words. But now, the pieces were starting to click. And if there was ever a time, it's right now. // I didn't sleep a wink that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the clink of whiskey glasses like a cold verdict ringing through my soul. I lay there, staring at the wooden ceiling Grandpa fixed when I was a kid, the same one we'd turned into our private universe, sketching star maps with pencils. I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm the only one standing between him and the vultures laughing over his grave, plotting to tear it all apart. Then I remembered the letter. "There's a letter for you, hidden in the desk. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." This was the time he meant. This was it. I shot up, hands trembling as I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the hallway. The house was dead quiet, everyone fast asleep. Outside, the night was pitch black, an owl hooting in the distance, like some cosmic signal. Grandpa's study was just as he left it. The smell of oak, old printer ink, and the peppermint candy he always chewed still hung in the air. I stepped up to his desk, the same one from the 60s, and knelt by the bottom drawer. I ran my fingers along the underside, tracing the wood's edge. Then, I felt it, a strange notch, a thin panel, taped down with brittle, ancient tape. I pried it loose. There it was, a faded yellow envelope, edges worn, with 2 words scrawled across it. For Red. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter, careful but firm. Red, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But it also means you're ready. You need to know the truth. Your parents mortgaged their share of the land to cover business debts. Ethan, well, you've probably seen it. Gambling debts piled high. They planned to sell this land. They thought I didn't know, but I did, and I acted. In the basement, behind the wine rack, the 3rd brick from the left hides a safe. The code is your birthday. Inside is the truth. All of it. And Red, possession is 9/10 of the law. But love, that's the whole of a legacy. I always believed in you. Franklin. I sank to the floor, the letter still in my hands, tears streaming down onto his words. Not from pain, from trust. From knowing he saw what my family never did, my worth. I stood up, eyes blazing. The trip to the basement tonight wouldn't just be about finding the truth. It was the start of my counterstrike, /. I crept down to Grandpa's old basement in the dark, with only my phone's flashlight and the echo of my footsteps bouncing off the cold stone walls. The air down here was thick as fog, heavy with the scent of rotting wood, aged wine, and time baked into every brick. He'd been clear, the 3rd brick from the left in the wine wall. I knelt, running my fingers along the deep red bricks, each one guarding secrets of generations. One felt looser than the rest. I pressed and it slid back, revealing a small black metal safe, coated in the dust of years. I whispered my birthday, 081296. A sharp click rang out. The safe door swung open. Inside, no cash, no gold, no jewels, just the truth. And proof. A thick envelope labeled in bold, property and legacy files, confidential. I pulled out the documents, hands shaking, knowing I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Inside, a deed transferring the entire 120-acre property from Franklin to me, signed, notarized, and stamped 3 months before he passed. Bank statements from my parents, showing massive loans against their share of the land with notes. High-risk investment, failed project, 2018. Emails from Ethan to some guy named Cole at Westwood Development, talking about a 7-figure deal. No need to loop in Red. The old man's on his last legs. Screenshots of Ethan's casino debts from Atlantic City, over $210,000, with several marked aggressive collections. And then, I found an old, worn leather notebook. I opened it and choked up. It was a photo album Grandpa made just for me. Pictures of me from childhood to now, with him setting up the swing, building the chicken coop, installing our first test solar panel. Each photo had his handwritten notes. Red learning to fix the roof. Red planting the first spring tree. Red, the keeper of this place's future. I sat on the cold brick floor, papers scattered around me, feeling like I was in the eye of a storm. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had the truth, the law, and Grandpa's heart. They'd painted me as the lost little girl, but I'm not lost. I'm the only one who knows exactly what I'm doing. Tomorrow is gonna be a long day, / the next morning, as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the basement window, I was still there, surrounded by documents, old photos, and memories money couldn't buy. I knew I couldn't face my family without legal firepower. And I knew Franklin, with the caution of a war veteran, wouldn't have left me to fight alone. So I drove straight to town, to the weathered law office with a faded sign, Howard Green, family attorney since 1974. Howard was Grandpa's closest friend, the guy who slipped me caramel candies when I still carried a backpack. He was older now, hands a bit shaky, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. I set the bag of documents on his desk. I found these in Grandpa Franklin's hidden safe. I need to know, does this give me a shot at protecting the land and myself? He didn't answer right away. He opened each file, reading, nodding, furrowing his brow at points, then looked up, his eyes glinting like he was seeing a younger Franklin in me. He planned for everything, he said slowly. The deeds airtight, notarized. Documents proving their debts, their scheme to sell the land illegally, and most crucially, the timing. 3 months before he passed. I swallowed hard. So, they can't take the land? Howard smiled, not the grin of a lawyer smelling victory, but the warm smile of a father watching a kid he once doted on stand tall on her own. Sierra, not only can they not take it, but if they try to sell, they'll be staring down fraud charges. I exhaled, like Someone had lifted a boulder off my chest. Then he pulled a small envelope from the safe behind him, labeled clearly, "To be delivered to Red only. He left this for you," said to hand it over when you really understood what was at stake. I opened it. A small note, written in his bold, lively script. "If they choose money, you choose memories. If they choose to sell, you choose to preserve. A legacy isn't in the land records. It's in the heart. And I know your heart's big enough for it all." I folded the note and tucked it into my left chest pocket. This fight wasn't just legal. It was about identity, about trust, about love. Tomorrow's the will reading, and I'm ready. That night, I walked into the dining room like I was stepping onto a battlefield draped in a tablecloth and scented candles. Mom, Diane, had pulled out all the stops for dinner, the most elaborate spread I'd ever seen. Southern-style roast beef with brown gravy, crispy cornbread, the salad she knew I'd loved since high school. But there was no warmth, just calculation. Dad, as always, aligned his knife blade perfectly, arranging the wine glasses so not a single fingerprint marred the rims. His usual invisible control, disguised as finesse. Ethan lounged back in his chair, wearing a crisp dress shirt, hair slicked like he was prepping for his next imaginary startup pitch. His face beamed. His eyes were ice. I sat down, silent. Plates were served. Knives and forks clinked softly against porcelain, like a knock at the door before a storm. We ate in silence, not the kind from having nothing to say, but the kind where everyone's waiting for the right moment to strike. After dessert, apple pie, of course, Ethan set his napkin on his lap. Slowly, deliberately, like he'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Sierra," he started, his voice light as a spring breeze but sharp as a razor's edge. "You know, with Grandpa gone, things need to change." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my face neutral. "What kind of change?" "This land, the estate, it's going to Mom and Dad," he went on, glancing at our parents, who wore their fake pious expressions. "And we'd have plans." I cut in, soft but razor sharp. "Do those plans include ripping Grandpa's photos off the walls and listing his woodshop on Craigslist?" No one answered. Ethan took a breath, leaning toward me. "You don't live here anymore. Your life's in Seattle, or New York, or wherever you're playing at building your greenhouses. You've got 1 week to pack your stuff. After that, the lawyers will handle the rest." 1 week. He said it like it was a favor. Like I was a guest getting a heads up before being booted from an Airbnb. Mom said nothing. Dad adjusted his knife. No one objected. No one spoke up. 1 week to leave the place I'd spent my life building with Grandpa. I set my fork down gently, wiped my mouth, and stood. No tears. No yelling. No slamming the table like they might have hoped. I just said, "Thanks for dinner. Oh, and don't worry. There'll be changes tomorrow. Just not the ones you're expecting." Then I turned and walked away from the table. They thought they'd won. They didn't know. I was just getting started. The next morning, the sky was clear as glass. Like the universe was playing a cruel joke. I drove to Howard Green's law office with my heart racing, but my mind sharper than ever. This was it, the moment the real cards hit the table. No more pretending. No more hints. No more 1 week to get out. My family was already there when I walked in. Dad, Mom, Ethan, dressed to the nines, perched on leather chairs like they were waiting for a trophy. Ethan even had sunglasses hooked on his shirt collar, the kind of move you'd see from a guy who thinks he's the lead in an HBO drama. Howard opened the file, his voice low but steady. "Thank you all for being here. Today, I'll read the final will of Franklin Jeremiah Morgan, duly executed and signed 3 months before his passing." I caught Ethan's eye. He smirked, like he was thinking, "We'll take the deeds, and you can keep your memories." But then, Howard read the critical part aloud. The entirety of the Morgan Ranch estate, including the main house, 120 acres of farmland, the woodshop, the barn, the irrigation system, and all associated assets, was legally transferred to my granddaughter, Sierra Morgan, on July 12th of this year. As such, this property is no longer subject to the will's distribution. The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was the sound of collapse. Ethan broke first. What? He couldn't do that. He was sick. He wasn't in his right mind. Mom gasped. Dad's knuckles went white from gripping his hands. Howard didn't flinch. The transfer is backed by 2 doctors' certifications of mental capacity. It's notarized, recorded on video, and verified by the county clerk's office. It's legal. Ironclad. I sat still, eyes forward, heart pounding like a war drum. Not from fear. From watching everything turn, exactly as Grandpa planned. Howard paused, then pulled out another envelope. And finally, Franklin left a special letter with instructions to read it aloud if there were any negative reactions. I looked up. Ethan froze. Dad muttered a curse. Mom shut her eyes. He began to read. And every word from Grandpa rang out, like he was sitting right there, smiling. If you're surprised, good. That's what I wanted. I didn't die so you could carve up the land. I left it to the one person who knows how to keep it. Read. It's that simple. No more needed to be said. The board was flipped. The queen wasn't Ethan. It was me. Backslash, backslash. As Howard folded Grandpa's letter, the room felt like it had been sucked dry of air. Ethan shot up like someone had kicked his chair out. No. No way. The old man was senile. Sierra must have pulled strings, had to. I didn't say a word. I just opened my purse and pulled out a thick file, the kind of clear plastic binder office workers use to end careers. If you want to talk about pulling strings, I started, my voice eerily calm. Let me pull them all. This is a copy of your contract with Westwood Development, dated June, back when Grandpa was still alive. And the land was already no longer yours. I slapped the contract with Ethan's sloppy signature and a scanned $250,000 deposit onto the table. Mom and Dad signed bank loans, mortgaging their share of the land, without asking Grandpa, then used it to cover failed business debts. I dropped a stack of financial statements next. Mom snatched them up, her face going pale. And Ethan? I turned to him. You used family assets as collateral for gambling debts. Atlantic City, 3 casinos, over $200,000. Some of those debts have been sold to special collections agencies. You know who I'm talking about, right? His face went from red to white to sickly green. No one in the room dared breathe, too loud. Howard laced his fingers, staring them down. To put it simply, every move you 3 have made over the past 6 months has been a fraudulent claim to ownership. And if Sierra wants, she could press charges. Dad finally spoke, his voice shaky. We're family. We can't sue each other. I locked eyes with him. Family doesn't stab each other in the back, doesn't sell out a legacy while the man's still breathing, and doesn't clink glasses to kick their own kid out like it's a business deal. Mom whispered, tears starting to fall. Are you really going to throw us out? I took a deep breath. You've got 24 hours to pack your personal belongings. Not the heirlooms. Not the antique furniture. Not the land. That's mine. Grandpa gave it to me because he knew I wouldn't trade it for cash from some guy in a Ralph Lauren shirt. Ethan opened his mouth again, but Howard cut him off. Sierra's other attorney will send formal notice this afternoon. I suggest you focus on packing. I stood up, said nothing more. They came to crush me with power. But Grandpa, he gave me the one power they'll never have. Trust. And proof. Backslash, backslash, 1 year later. The Morgan Ranch is no longer a battlefield over inheritance. It's a new breath. A testament to a legacy not sold off, but restored, cherished, shared. I stand on the porch, looking out at the budding fruit trees in the Franklin Morgan Community Orchard, where every tree bears the name of someone who's given to this town. Real people. Real work. No PR stunts, no shiny sponsors. The ranch has changed. But so have I. Then he shows up. Ethan. Standing at the edge of the yard, in a flannel shirt and worn jeans, hair cropped short, no Starbucks cup or fancy car keys in hand. I don't move. Just watch. Hey, he says, eyes meeting mine. I don't expect you to forgive me.